Mary Maslowski. I'm the chairperson of the Harwich Historic District and Historical Commission. I'd like to call to order the meeting of Wednesday, May 15th, 2019. We are holding this meeting at 732 Main Street in the Griffin Room at Harwich Town Hall. As required by law, the town is required to inform you that we may audio or video record this meeting. If any person intending to either audio or video record the meeting, we would ask you to notify the chair at this time. Hearing none, we will start with a roll call, please.
Julia Eldridge.
Robert Bradley.
Bob Doan.
Jean Steiner.
Brendan Lowney.
Gail Carroll.
Okay, so we will start by opening our public hearings. The first item on our agenda is a public hearing which was continued from our last meeting. It is HH 2019-08. It's a notice of intent which has been received for 12 Grove Street, map 6B, parcel L52, Macris ID HRW.491 in the RH-2 zone. The application proposes the partial demolition and reconstruction of a dormer at the front of the house. The application is pursuant to the Code of the Town of Harwich, Chapter 131, Historic Preservation, Article 2, Philip Dowd as owner applicant. Hello.
Hello, I am Jason Muto representing Philip Dowd.
Okay. So if you could start by just walking us through your proposal.
Sure. So what Philip would like to do to the home is he'd like to add a dormer on the front side left of the front-facing gable. The idea of that is that the upstairs is half of it's pretty unusable due to the slope of the ceiling, as well as they would like to have a half bathroom in the upstairs. Currently, the only bathroom in the home is on the first floor beside the kitchen, which requires them at night to walk out of the bedroom, down the stairs, through the living room, through the dining room, through the kitchen to get to their bathroom. So, with consideration to the way the structure is currently built, we will be matching all of the exterior trim details that currently exist. They're kind of small rakes. They're built out about 8 inches. So everything on the existing home will be matched with the new addition, as well as the roofing, the siding, and the windows, all to match what's existing currently there.
Okay. So we'll start with questions from the board. Anybody like to start? Mr. Doan.
Sure. On the following pages, you have done the existing to new. So on the first page, not sure if it's labeled with a number or not, A or 1. That is this facing the house?
This is standing
street?
on Grove Street facing the house.
Okay. So is that just expanding it, or is it moving it forward? It looks like it's moving it forward.
So what there is there is a shed dormer that faces you.
Right.
And then you'll see the gable that's facing you, there's a dormer on the right-hand side. So we'll be adding a dormer to the left-hand side, and then connecting the roof lines of the existing dormer. Provide that room for the bathrooms.
Oh, okay, so you're not like adding on to the house, it's just putting a dormer on that side.
Correct.
And you're, on the second drawing, are you adding a dormer here too? Is this the back, or is this still the front?
So if you were standing on Grove Street, this is moving around to your left. So now you're looking at the
Oh, of course, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, gotcha. Okay, that's all my questions.
Anyone else?
I will say one thing. The girl who printed out the plans, the siding will not be pink.
Oh, I thought that was interesting.
I thought that's the best thing about it.
We like color in the historic.
Particularly in that district.
Yeah, I got here for the ZBA meeting. I was looking at it and I was like, oh my goodness.
Mr. Bradley, do you have any comments?
No, I don't,
Questions?
actually. I
Okay.
took a look at the building.
I don't either. I did a drive-by. but-
Yeah.
Okay.
I just had one quick question about the windows. It seems from existing to the proposed proposed, are you scaling the windows down to casements, or
No, that was,
it's just a way printed out?
yeah, the way
Okay.
it printed out, yeah. We'll be matching the size of the windows that are currently in the dormer that
Mhm.
exist. We'll be matching those windows exactly.
On the other side?
Okay.
I believe they're Harvey, so it should be pretty easy.
Anyone else on the board? Okay, we'll open it up to questions from the public. Is anybody here with comments or questions? Hearing none. We're all set on this board. The chair would entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
I move to close the public hearing.
Seconded.
So motion's been made by Mr. Doan, seconded by Mr. Bradley to close the public hearing. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any in opposition? Hearing none, motion carries. Then, as a reminder, we are here for a notice of intent, which is whether or not to impose the demo delay on the application. So the chair would entertain a motion on the application.
I move to allow the dormers to be built and not to put a restriction of 1 year on the project.
Okay, so you're,
That's the correct way to word it, but
so a motion to approve the
demolition.
demolition as indicated in the
So
application?
That's better.
Okay, so Mr. Doan has made the motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Mrs. Steiner seconded. Any discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
Any in opposition? Hearing none, it is unanimous. Thank you very much. We'll let the building department know.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you all for being here. I appreciate that.
Yes, we do have a full house. Okay. So call to order the next public hearing on our agenda. It is HH 2019-11. It's a notice of intent which has been received for 5 Brooks Road, map 5, parcel X1-2 in the R-L zone. The application proposes 100% demolition of a single-family house and reconstruct in the same footprint. The application is pursuant to the Code of the Town of Harwich, Chapter 131, Historic Preservation, Article 2, Andrea Di Giovanni, Brenda Realty Trust as owner applicant.
Hi. good
Hello.
evening.
Please
Rob-
state your name for the record.
Rob McPhee, with McPhee Associates, here on behalf of Andrew Di Giovanni and the Realty Trust. And as you so well stated, we're here before for the demolition, 100% demolition of the existing house. I appreciate those that were able to make their time this week and get over to the house and have a little tour and see the existing conditions and what we were working with. Be happy to answer any questions, and I can give you a brief summary if you'd like.
If you could give us a brief summary that way for
Sure.
those that are watching
Yeah, sure.
at home and those in
absolutely.
the audience.
Absolutely. So we started to work with the current family a couple of years ago, looking at options for the house for doing some maintenance and renovations. And after looking at the condition of the house, which has been vacant for many years now, just decided that, you're opening up a Pandora's box, and there's really no stopping once you start. And with the current energy codes and the building codes to comply within that kind of a location, took the approach that it would be best to just demo and start from scratch. And so we've worked on some plans for a new single-family home that looks very similar to the one that's there today, as well as fitting into the similar footprint that's there. Not looking to build a very large house. It's a summer house for the family. And we had a structural engineer that we work with go out and take a look at the property, not with the intent to deem it unsalvageable, if you would, just to get his opinion as far as what's there and what would have to take place. I had sent over to the office today, I don't know if it came in your package, but it was a letter on his letterhead for everyone just outlining the various things that are there and the changes that have to take place to bring the house up to current standards with the building code.
Is that the Mackenzie engineering?
That's the Mackenzie engineering letter. Yep. And so he did a good job, I thought, of trying to outline it, and that's really what we're looking for. We did take the approach that we thought we should come through historic first, rather than go through conservation and Board of Appeals and then having to get deferred here by the building office, in case there was a difference of opinion with the board here. We didn't want to spend the time or money going through the other departments. So this is our first stop. We know we have conservation to go through, Board of Health, Building, and Board of Appeals as well. So, and the other thing I would just like to mention is, you know, the assessor's office is what had indicated it's an 1878 age for the house. I'm not sure if that's accurate or not. I mean, looking around, it's clear it's an older house, but I don't know what the board's opinion was on that as well.
Okay. Start with any questions or comments from the board. Mr. Bradley?
All right. I did go down there and inspect it with the group, inspect it. And there is a possibility that the core house might be of the age that's recorded. But so much is done to it, the inside has been totally gutted. There's no existing condition of an 18th century house at all. And the exterior, ditto, the same thing. There's no identification. Also, the house is in bad shape, which brings up a problem of, you know, neglect, demolition by neglect. I really have a problem with this, and I think the commission should be dealing with the problem in the future, that we make some really strong guidelines as to how to deal with that. One being that I think we should have a true estimate of reconditioning a house, rather than just having somebody coming in and say they had talked to somebody. I don't think we necessarily should look at the, you know, the replacement, so I'm not going to comment on that, but what's there is not of any value as far as I could see, and I don't think the house is adding anything to the environment around it at this time. So I have unless I hear differently tonight, my tendency is to say let it go.
Okay, anyone else?
Yeah, I agree. I looked at, I do think that the basic structure may be that old, and certainly the windows in front are, I think, of that age, and actually are in exceptionally good shape. And I don't know if you ever try to keep those type things, but they are good windows if anybody wanted to use them for restoring their property. But other than that, it has been totally redone. Even the foundation is certainly not original. So they're really, other than looking at the windows themselves, there's nothing that really represents the original building. And I have no issue with it.
And I noticed today when I was back over there this afternoon, and I had forgotten how many windows had been replaced on the street side, if you would, the vinyl.
Yeah.
Maybe like a Harvey window, you know, that's in there, but the porch windows are,
Those are amazing,
yeah, you know, with the
actually.
wavy glass and.
I
Mrs.
also
Steiner.
agree with Mr. Bradley and Mr. Doan. But I think one other thing that's kind of notable is the setting, which is extraordinary in terms of the view. And the fact that from what we heard yesterday, or whatever day it was, Monday, when we went, it sounds like the family is going to keep the natural setting, which to me it's the old Cape Cod. It's very duny and natural grasses and such. And it's a beautiful setting, and I think that with a simple house in there, it will be stunning. Yeah.
Brendan?
I agree exactly with what you just said. I think when I was out there earlier today, I was pleasantly surprised on the proposed plan. That was very impressive, that it is going to be a simple structure, very similar to what's there. So with regards to the structure, I agree with with Bob and Mr. Bradley as well, so, yeah.
Gail?
I only had a chance to drive by, and, from that view vista, you couldn't really tell one from the other. So
Right.
I bow to my colleagues.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Take it now, that's it.
Julie?
I did not get a chance to drive by, but I would have to say, what's going to be replaced there is almost what's there right now,
Right.
which is kind of nice and refreshing.
Right,
So,
right. We're not, I think I've mentioned, but we're not discussing tearing down the garage. That's, the idea is to stay with that, keep the driveway, it's just take the house down, go back new.
All right.
And,
So, if there are no more comments from the board, we'll open it up to the public. Is there anybody here for comments or questions? Hearing none, then the chair would entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
I so move.
I'll second.
Mrs. Steiner has moved, Mrs. Eldridge has seconded to close the public hearing. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any in opposition? Hearing none, motion carries. Then, in this instance, from what I hear, it sounds like, again, we're under a notice of intent. It appears that the chair would entertain a motion to approve the demolition of the building as indicated in the application. Is anybody making the motion?
I'll make the motion. Approve it the way it came in.
Okay, Mrs.
I'll
Eldridge.
second it.
Mrs. Eldridge has made the motion. Mr. Doan has seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any in opposition?
No opposition?
Hearing none, motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Much appreciated.
It's easy.
Have a good disease.
A second here. Okay. Next item on our agenda is a public hearing. So we'll open the public hearing for HH 2019-12. It's a notice of intent which has been received for 194 Pleasant Bay Road, map 113, parcel S3-A in the R-R zone. The application proposes 100% demolition of a detached barn. The application is pursuant to the Code of the Town of Harwich, Chapter 131, Historic Preservation, Article 2, Gregory P. and Terry L. Ostrander as owner applicant.
Hello.
Hello,
We're the owners. I'm Gregory, and it's my wife Terry.
thank you for coming.
Thanks for having us. We purchased the house just short of 4 years ago. We love the fact that it's an antique. We like the setting. We like the land. It came with an old barn that the home inspector said, I'm not even gonna look at it. So it had tilts and twists, and the bugs have got at it over the years. And in the last winter, we've had the interior start to collapse. There's no foundation to it. It's a cute family of foxes lived under it last year. Well, we got a letter from the insurance company that we have that inspected it, and they said it's unsafe, and they won't cover it, not only the structure for the falling, which we wouldn't expect them to, but also liability. So as the back has blown off, we've tried to cover it up. We've always kept it locked. The only thing that's in there is a lawnmower and a couple of the yard things.
Oh, dear.
But it looks like it's time for it to go. So that's why we're here today.
Okay. So just looking, you're not proposing to replace it at this
Not at this time.
Okay. Just making sure I have everything. All right, we'll open it up to questions from the board. Jean?
Well, I drove down there today, and I went down the driveway after I figured out I was looking in the wrong house first. And I didn't get out and walk around, but you can clearly see that the roof on that one side is about to cave in. I mean, I did not get out and look around and see all
I
the
won't
other.
walk in it.
Yeah.
Like, I put the lawnmower in, I lock the doors, I reach in, pull it out. I think it's too dangerous to be inside.
And the actual cross beam has fallen, so the second floor, it's really not safe.
Brendan? Anything?
I didn't have a chance to do a drive-by on this property, because I know it was set back and, I mean, structurally, from the pictures, it looks like it's in disrepair. But I'll have to defer to,
Okay.
someone else who's maybe been there.
Mr. Dillon, do you have any comments, questions?
Yeah, I did look at it, and it's a nice-looking barn of that period, with a traditional barn door and some nice features. It really, I mean, the way you get the property set up, you really can't see it from the road.
At all.
But I'm a little disappointed it wasn't taken care of, because it could have been a perfectly okay barn. But that's really all my comments.
Mr. Bradley?
I didn't go, I haven't made an inspection of it. But, and I noticed that which always bothers me with barns, is that the photographs don't show the relationship of the barn to the house. So I have to ask, is it near the house?
No, it's set back on the back part of the property.
Okay, you mentioned a minute ago that you can't really see it from the street.
No,
there's
because there's
a,
another property, there's another piece
Right here.
Here's the septic.
building in front of it.
Yeah, I don't have this folder. that's all.
There's the house, and this is the barn.
Oh.
So you'd have to go way down here.
There's a
You can't
cottage or
see it.
something, right? That's-
Yeah,
Okay,
that
thank
didn't
you.
look in
Yeah.
great shape either.
There's
What
an
is your
existing-
intent there?
That's on the insurance
Cottage
list, but
here.
we're fighting that at the moment, because that
here?
would give us
Yeah.
some storage
That's just an
space.
existing cottage also
So
on the
that-
property, but
that
they're
is
looking to
not-
get rid of this one.
That will walk inside, it doesn't feel unsafe.
Right.
You know, and it has a slab rustic foundation to it.
Okay.
I didn't hear what happened, but what, is there a floor on the barn at all?
Wood floor. Wood
Is there a
floor.
second floor?
Some of it's on the first floor.
Some of the first
becoming a
floor is
wood
in the.
floor.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
In the joke. Well, this is another thing again, demolition by neglect, and I'm not speaking of you, it's just
No,
that.
no, it's like that when we got it.
And I think the board has to sort of reconsider this problem. It's a nice-looking little structure. It's got some funny things to it, which is very typical of Cape Cod. And I hate to see them slowly, they're all disappearing, but I have to admit, I think this would be a total rebuild, not a rehab even. I think it would be a rebuild. And that would be up to you in the future. I hope that maybe you might consider the farms that are here.
Oh,
If you
yeah.
do something, or, you
Yeah,
know,
we've been down to Pine
like a
Harbor.
pink house
Had
with-
some discussions about some of the garages they have that might fit on the spot, but at this time, it's,
Yeah.
the insurance company so much forced our hand on when this could all happen.
well, insurance companies, you know. Well, that's all I guess I would say, is that the condition is so bad that I think without seeing it, my guess is that it have to be a total rebuild and not a rehab, which means there wouldn't be any particular, there wouldn't be very much saved. You know, I'm sure the bugs have gotten at it, and as you just said a minute ago. And I think it's gone. Are you going to take down the other building on the property?
Not at this time. We're working with the insurance company to see what they would require of us to cover it, basically. And
Yeah.
if we can work something out, then great. If not, then I guess we'll be back here.
Well, I didn't do my duty on this, and so I haven't really seen the situation. But, so it may not be worth even, I have no idea either, but I was just asking the question, I guess. What's charming about this kind of a house is, let's get the word charming out of there. What's interesting about it is that it's sort of a floor and a half. So the proportions are they become a little unique. The proportion of the building becomes sort of vertical and then it's capped off. And of course it has sort of an interesting door, the front door situation, the barn door situation is interesting with the horizontal strip. And maybe, down the road you might consider having some fun and play with that. And it wouldn't be, I know it won't be costly to replace that kind of thing, if you're building a new structure. Okay, that's all I have to say, I guess, talking on.
Any other comments from the board? Any comments or questions from members of the public? If you could come to the podium and state your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Ray Holton. I live on 186 Pleasant Bay Road, which abuts the property we're talking about this evening. We've lived in this property for 15 years and have seen most of it unoccupied for a number of years until the Ostranders purchased it. We've seen the deterioration of the building over the 15 years, which is very concerning. And also, from a liability standpoint, it backs up to a number of properties that are wooded. Now, I'm sure the wood in this barn is very dry, and if there was ever a fire, I'm concerned not only for our house, but also the people behind this barn. And so I support the Ostranders on what they're trying to do.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else that wishes to speak? Any other comments or points from the board? Hearing none, the chair would entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Mr. Doan has made the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Bradley has seconded. All those in favor of closing the public hearing?
Aye.
Any in opposition? Hearing none. Motion carries. So now the chair would entertain a motion on the notice of intent.
I'll move to approve the application as presented.
Okay, Mrs. Steiner has made a motion to approve the request for notice of intent for the demolition in accordance with the application. Is there a second?
Second.
Mrs. Carroll is seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any in opposition? Hearing none, motion carries. It is unanimous. Thank you very much. We'll let the building department know. Okay. Switching gears slightly, we will open the public hearing on our agenda for HH 2019-13. It's a certificate of appropriateness which has been received for 265 Sisson Road, identified as Harwich Junior Theater, map 40, parcel Z5 in the MR-L zone. The application proposes to install a wooden ground-mounted sign on the property. The application is pursuant to the Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 40C, Section 6, and the Code of the Town of Harwich, Chapter 131, Historic Preservation, Article 1. Town of Harwich as owner Chris Powicki as applicant. Hello.
Hi, good evening, Madam Chair. I am Chris Powicki, and I'm here tonight on behalf of Cape Cod Theater Company, Harwich Junior Theater. I'm glad you have the application before you. Your documents in front of you may be more complete than mine. I think it's pretty straightforward. What we're trying to do is put a sign in after almost a decade of leasing the building. We want to put a permanent sign in and publicize what we're up to in the community. We are flexible as to location if you have concerns about the specific location, and just want to hear your feedback and hopefully get an approval to go forward.
Okay, does everybody have a copy of the sign in your packet? So, any comments?
I have a comment.
So it's just a, please.
Okay. First of all, I think the location is probably a good one, because as I came down the street and came up the street, I could see where it would go. So, and I think that having a sign there will be very valuable, because for years I've been driving back and forth and wondered exactly what was in that building. I do have a question, though, and I'm looking at the two different things. As you come down Sisson from Main Street, you see the Brooks Academy and the Brooks Academy Museum, and then you would see the theater company building. And then you go a little further and you see the farmer's market sign, and a little further down you see the cultural center sign. I'm confused at the wording, if this is called the Art Center instead of the Cape Cod Theater Company.
Okay.
I think it might be confusing with the cultural center down the street.
Okay, I guess I would say that we might predate the cultural center a little bit, by about a decade. Even though we didn't have a, permanently mounted sign like this, we've been operating that location in that way, and we've had a sandwich sign there for years, and we've run camps there and classes there and rehearsals there, and we've done musical performances, we've done open mic nights, we've been advertising as the Art Center for a long, long time. So our thought is that actually by putting up the signage, we support the cultural center, we don't compete with the cultural center, and that it helps establish this district within town as a vibrant area. And that's part of what we want to contribute to.
And I love the idea of the whole concept of a cultural center in Harwich. I mean, I think that's wonderful. I just think from a branding perspective, we need to be careful about what is where. And I would see this more as the Cape Cod Theater Company. And if the cultural center stays where it is, that has a broader spectrum of arts in it. That's my opinion, anyway.
Just as a point, I really don't think that's not within our purview to tell them what they should call themselves.
No,
And,
okay, that's
and
true.
only because it is their brand and it is how they've been holding themselves out. So I don't really know that, I mean,
Okay.
I think our purview in this situation is the look and feel of the sign and the placement of the sign, because it's in the historic district.
Well, I agree with that part, but
yeah.
I just don't want it to be confusing.
I
I mean,
understand.
because part of signage is to direct people.
I understand
and
that.
to help them clarify what's where.
I understand that. I do think their brand is their brand. I'm not sure that we have a say in that, unfortunately or fortunately, I guess, depending. Mr. Doan?
Can you walk through the materials the sign's made of? Because, I mean, it says wooden, but
Right.
clearly state what components are what.
Right, so it's a, wooden posts, wooden pedestal, wooden frame, and then the actual signage itself with the print, the colored print on it, and the black print on it is a dye bond material that's, all framed in within the wooden framework.
Would that be like
It's like
stickers or whatever? Oh, I think
it's
stickers.
like an aluminum plastic
Oh, okay.
composite, basically. It's a standard sign. There are other signs right in the district that use this same construction.
Anyone else?
Well, I'd like to say something if nobody wants to.
I'm sorry?
May I?
Please.
Yeah, of course.
I'm not so positive about this as apparently everybody is. It's so far away from it seems to me a sign should be very distinctly involved with what it's relating to. And I understand probably what happened here is the parking lot is right is right next to it. In fact, you're edging onto the parking lot. And I don't think it's not doing anything positive for the building itself. It's not, in fact, the way I read it, it's hardly related to it at all. It's just, you know, a sign saying it's the art center. And I respect your opinion on this, but theater isn't the only arts in the world. And we do have a budding situation down in the middle school, and I don't think we should kill it off. But that's beyond our purview, and I do agree with that. But as far as this relating to the building, I don't think it makes any compliment to it, and I don't think, and I have a little bit of a, you know, the fake pediment look design that's on here doesn't also, I don't think it's beneficial to the simplicity of what this town is. We have a very simple kind of architecture, which is very elegant, and most of our pilasters and columns and whatever are square cut rather than round cut and whatever. And so to put a little pediment on a sign like this, so it seems to be contradictory to what's going on in town in general. And in fact, the reason the Albro House is sort of interesting in my mind compared to what's around it is the elaborateness of the Albro House compared to the Greek revivals and Georgian buildings that are sitting around town. So I guess, personally, I would like to see somehow this, we're having a problem with signage in the town. People are unhappy that we even have to say anything about it. But I think it's an extraordinarily important thing to control the signage and to somehow make it, to give it some sort of vocabulary for the streetscape that's going to hopefully will improve in the future. I don't know where the sidewalk is supposed to go here, and of course 4 years ago we had a big plan for some housing and all the rest of it, which got shot down. And I don't know where that stands now today, and I don't understand the relationship anymore of the rec building to, although I know the theater has moved in on it, but I mean, I don't know the legality of it, I don't know the contracts or any of that stuff. So I don't know how long this will be in effect. It's just a sign, and a sign is just a sign, you can always take it down. But
So, Mr. Bradley, are you saying you would like to see the sign closer to the building?
yes.
As opposed to the entrance of the parking lot?
Thank you for simplifying my
I was leaning towards that being closer, and then also, I had a question for you, maybe. you can help me
So
with that. Yep.
one question, as far as the entrance to the parking is concerned, would you, I mean, because I think that's where
That's an
the
interesting-
placement is, I think the placement helps them with the entrance to the parking. Would you suggest a second smaller sign that just said parking at the entrance?
Well, it becomes an issue, because where is the entrance and the exit to the parking space?
Right where the sign is.
Right where the sign is?
That's the exit or the entrance?
Same, same. It's an in and out,
Well, maybe I was,
almost across from where the farmer's market is.
I thought there was an entrance near the building.
No, that is the one near the building.
That is the one.
There is one at the very
Well,
end of the
I'm not-
the other end of the parking lot, which is just a rutted dirt
Oh, that's what I
area.
thought you were referring to.
No, this is up to the middle parking, I think, the middle entrance. is-
Well, there was even, at one point, there was a discussion going on between the abutter and rec building.
Take that one.
Okay, that one,
Oh,
I think
yeah.
that went to the building department. Mr. Bradley, this is
Oh,
the intent is to.
Yeah, I actually, I got this one. I do have it.
Yeah.
Did you see it?
I have some, yeah.
And just as a design note, we're not wedded to the decorative top. I think that the design was intended to duplicate the gable. They essentially parallel each other.
Right.
If you look at the picture. But we're not wedded to that. If it's the kind of thing that has, the board's concern, and you'd like to draw a line on that, please do. We're not concerned about that at all. We're just interested in moving forward and getting signage up for our summer campers.
Are you going to have another sign, more signage on the building? Or is this all it would be?
This is it. There is no, I don't think signage was allowed on the building. We had a discussion about it maybe a decade or so ago, even though there was signage on the building at some point. I think it was deemed potentially inappropriate for that structure, and we're fine with that. We're not planning any other signage. This is essentially as far as we want to go. And I understand that the town may have recently made a decision to transfer the property to the housing trust. We have a lease with the town for 25 years for just that, for that building, that site, and an agreement in our lease with sharing of the parking with whatever gets developed in terms of housing there. We're not going to put concrete down when we put the footings in, because if the town decides to move forward with housing and, you know, they want to change driveway configurations, we're completely flexible on that. But we feel it's really important and valuable for us, for our summer campers especially, which is when the building gets a lot more use than throughout the entire year. It will benefit us to move forward with a sign.
So you're looking at this as sort of a temporary situation, which possibly might be uprooted by housing later on?
I think our lease has another 25 years to run, or no, is it 25 or 15?
It was 25.
15,
You got at least
15 more
15.
years to run. It was a 25-year lease, so 15 more years to run. So we're looking at it, at the sign, as a 15-year sign. If we have to move it at the town's order, because they want to do something else with the site, you know,
Yeah.
we'll absolutely work with them. If they decide to put a sidewalk in, that's fine. We'll move it, but the town did sign off as the owner of the site on this application, as I understand it.
And I do think, Bob, the parcel itself, it was and I think Brenda can clarify, I think it was the back portion of the parcel that connects up to the conservation land.
That's correct. Like the
It's
back
not
right-hand
it's not the
corner.
building in the beginning of the parking lot.
Yeah.
So, as far as I knew, this building is intended to stay right where it is. Right, I
Yeah,
mean,
the building would not be,
As the use too, right, in the current
Correct.
use.
Right. Mr.
I mean-
Dillon, any comments?
Yeah, you could move the sign a little close to the building on that piece. The only thing I do realize is that if you put it in front of the building, you have to have two signs because of the angle. Only one can see it.
Right,
You have to choose which one, which this solves that problem.
That was
But,
the
I mean, it
thought.
could be moved closer to the building, I think, but.
Well, when you're coming, well, that's another interesting thing. When you're coming from from Main Street, and you come to that, you're pretty sure that this sign will suddenly show up and indicate what's there.
Yeah, and people will know that's where they turn in right there, because it'll be near the driveway. And again, it'll be more visible coming up Sisson Road towards Main Street. But again, you know, in a case like that, where the sign is beyond the driveway, that's a good situation, because it eases the turn into the driveway.
Well, you know what, the other thing, quickly looking at the sign here, all of a sudden, there's an awful lot on it. But there's no parking. There's nothing to indicate parking. And it would, since this isn't quite set yet, it might be worth to reconsider what the sign is actually doing. I mean, you seem to imply that it has something to do with parking. Wouldn't it be wise to say parking? You could have a funny little guy with a finger or something.
We tried not to get too elaborate.
Fits the arts, you know.
Yeah, our thought was to put it in the most visible spot where the existing trees don't screen it out, and where it's not too far away from the driveway where people might say, oh, I'll turn down Parallel Street to get to the parking. And I think that it's not intended to be a parking sign. It's intended to introduce the building, but it's at a location where it hopefully will be a visual cue to the parking that's there.
So the parking people, the people who come in and need to park aren't necessarily going to go there. They'll be going over to the museum or whatever to park.
I think generally they use our building, or we have always allowed the farmer's market to use the parking lot, and we'll continue to do so. But it's, you know, I think that the parking lot is generally used for the building or the farmer's market, but not the museum, because they have some.
Have you had any situation where it's so crowded or anything, or traffic or whatever?
Not, I don't think so. Mr. Doan might know better than me, because he's closer to the neighborhood than I am.
Yeah, the only time is on Farmers Market Day, all the parking lots around there fill up.
This
Just to
one,
clarify,
they
on the,
fill up.
on the parking, is in the lease, as I recall, it's a reciprocal agreement that is considered public parking, as well as the Historical Society is considered public parking, and either organizations can use either at any time. There was no restrictions or no, these few spaces are safe for this. That only comes in case if there's housing, then that does dictate how many spaces can be used for the
And that may never get,
theater.
that may never
Right,
go
that's,
anywhere.
That'd be a zoning, then we're changing the whole use of the space.
Any other comments about the sign, its placement, its look, its feel, its color? It's,
I think it'd be nice to have a sign there.
Yeah.
would be nice to have a
Definitely
sign there.
will.
I just, a couple of things.
Brendan.
I agree with moving the sign closer. I understand the point of entry for the parking, and to your point, maybe just a parking sign, something that can be removable, but to get something more in front of the building, so it's designated, this is the building you're going to for this purpose. Then I also would like to add, if we do approve it, no concrete footing, so it could be removed, and just closer to the building.
There's something just very sort of, I don't mean to be offensive or anything, but it's a little bit sloppy about where it's placed. There doesn't seem to be any raison d'etre of why this is here, I mean, it seems you could put it 10 feet that way or 10 feet that way. And we have, because it's not actually in the historic district, but
Yes,
Oh,
it
it
is.
is.
Oh, it is? I
Oh,
thought
absolutely.
It is, no, this is a certificate of
yeah,
appropriation.
that whole property is
This
historic
is a
district.
certificate of appropriateness, sorry.
Oh, I thought it stopped with the building.
I'm pleased to be
No.
here, but I'm not here voluntarily.
This is the last parcel in the historic district.
I didn't think it included that parking.
It does,
Yeah.
it does. So that's why I'm asking, look, feel, placement.
Well, then it's, this, I'm having trouble gelling what I'm thinking, which is sort of, there's a disconnect in my head anyway, and Brendan just said that he tends to agree with the idea it might be closer, and I think that's an answer,
Right.
maybe, but maybe not, and I don't know.
So a suggestion, could you move it 10 feet closer to up the street? I mean, I think it's still past the building.
Yeah, I'm just worried about 10 feet. I'm not sure what the distance is to the tree, and I don't want to get in the root zone. I'm absolutely happy to move it. This was picked, after walking the site
Sure.
and discussing it with a few people. My only question is, if we move it 10 feet or if we move it 30 feet, is it okay to put a little stake in the ground with a nicely painted wooden stake with parking on it, or does that have to come back to the
So
historic district?
what I would suggest is that we continue this for our next meeting, and you can get us a little mock-up of the sign. Doesn't have to be, we did this with the gas station across the street, for an ice machine sign.
Can I phrase it another way? Could we come back with a parking sign? Because we really want to get this, time is of the essence in a way, and we'd really like to have it.
So the only issue with you coming back is that then it's a new application and it has to be re-advertised again?
And
Right.
do I have to notice it again? 'Cause
Yes,
there
you would.
were,
Yes,
I
so
don't know,
that's,
50 or
so that's my point.
75 or something people we had to notify.
so that's my point. We
okay,
are in a public hearing, we can continue it to a
When's the
date
next
certain.
one?
So we typically meet on the third Wednesday of the month. So our next one would be June 19th. Would that give you enough time to, and then we can,
How about this? We have lived without any sign about the parking.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we just move the sign, if that pleased you, and not put a little parking sign in, would that make it possible to go forward today?
Can I
so would,
throw
I'd also entertain doing a quick meeting if people were available and we could squeeze a quick meeting in.
Sure.
To make it quicker.
So I'm happy to hear from people, so Bob.
Now, the only thing is, I've lived here all my life, and I've been to this building almost literally all my life. So even as a baby, I
didn't
was
you
carried
actually-
Yeah,
in
you were carried into the
Have
building.
you ever actually lived there, Bob?
And the parking, to me, is always so obvious that it doesn't need a parking sign.
Yeah.
That's my opinion.
Okay,
Can
Okay,
I make
so-
one last point?
yes.
The reason why I think if you were to put the sign right at the parking, if I was going to the farmer's market or to the historical society, if I was new to the town, I would not park there. So that's maybe to clarify, maybe what you were driving at, like why have it there? I just think it should be in front of the building because then it defines what the building is. Because driving by there, you have no idea what that building is.
I think that's a good point.
So I do understand that point. To me, I think Bob made the point, if you're I think if you're in front of the building on Sisson Road, if you're closer to Main Street, then I think you only see it coming from Main Street. I'm not sure I don't know if you're gonna see it if you're coming in the other direction.
You need two signs if it's right in front of the building. You need an angled sign like this with two sides.
So,
You could do that.
Nobody did, yeah.
so
But if it is just back further by the.
if it's a little bit, if it's a little bit past coming from Harwich Center
Right.
and a little bit further from the parking lot entrance, then I think you'll catch it in both directions. I think.
So we're gonna go with the medium bear on that one? Not too far, but not too,
I do. Yes.
I mean, do you think having it in front of the front door, that's not a good location? You're saying you won't catch it?
Personally,
catch it
I
coming
don't.
down.
Yeah. You wouldn't see it.
I don't think coming up Sisson.
Sisson Road, you're
it's-
not
it's
gonna see it.
pretty far by.
It's pretty far behind. I got you.
And again, we're happy to move it closer to the building. Absolutely no problems with that. We want to make sure, because it's the town's property, that they were happy with it at this spot. We want to make sure that they would be happy with it if you direct us to move it to a point further up Sisson towards Main Street.
So who was the one that, who won the town gave you approval?
You would
Dr.
have the
Building, or did you-
signature, you would have, it might be Chris's,
Okay.
the town administrator's
So
signature.
that's my
on it.
only, that would be the only caution why I wouldn't,
Oh, I think
Suggest
Chris- I think
closing.
Chris signed it.
why I wouldn't suggest closing the public hearing, because if we close the public hearing, it's closed.
Right.
So we can, so we could suggest it come 10 feet closer. That would give Mr. Perwicki the opportunity to talk to administration, get their sign off on it. I'd be happy to come back in 2 weeks if we did a limited meeting that we, came in and addressed the sign, and then it wouldn't delay him too much.
I'm available.
So we're talking, today's the 15th, we're talking the 29th.
I will not
Of
be
May.
here myself, but
So I
I'll be
just
here.
want to make sure that we have a quorum.
I don't think I'm here the 29th either. Let me
the
just
week
double
after
check.
that I would be.
That's the 29th of May, right?
What about next week, on the 22nd?
No. I'm not available. I planned my whole life around this meeting.
I understand that.
Yeah, it's all right.
I understand that. Listen, this is my third meeting this week, so
And it's only Wednesday.
it's only Wednesday.
May I ask one other question?
Sure.
Is the door, this front door where the ramp is that the one that's typically used? Or
We
is
use,
there a back door?
there
like the
are two
library?
back
Yeah.
doors. We use them all. And there's a door up to the second story, two doors up to the second story. The one that is used most frequently, I would say, in practice, is the back door because that's where the parking lot is.
I was just thinking about this, when you think about Brooks Library, they use the back door also frequently because that's where their parking is, but their sign is in front. So,
Well, the sign acts as an identifier for what
Right.
the building is. Once you know the town, or if you live here or whatever, you know, it becomes a moot. But, and I guess that has something to do with what I'm talking about, is that the buildings need identifications, town hall, or whatever building we're talking about, even the church.
Before we move on, is there anybody here in the audience that wished to comment on this matter? Okay. Then we need 4 of us to come back for another meeting.
I'm here.
You're available next week. Anybody else available next week on the Wednesday?
I think I am.
I'll be here.
I might be able to get here next week.
Gail's a no.
I guess it
Wednesday is the 22nd, day after town election.
all depends on my husband. But I think I can, yeah.
For some reason, I already had it in my calendar to be here. I don't know why. So
You
yes,
did?
I guess I'm available.
So Julie, you're available? I can be here on the 22nd. Brendan can. Gail, can you? No. Bob is a no. Bob is a maybe.
He's not sure.
Well, it's a question of the health situation.
I understand that.
I'm gonna say yes. We're talking the 22nd?
Just next week, a week from today.
Yeah, the 22nd, which is
No.
next week.
No, I'm planning on being here.
Okay. So I think that gives us 4.
And Jean
Plus,
says,
Angela might be.
Possibly.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So you have 4.
So we have 4. The alternative is, because I think we're in the same situation on the 29th,
29th I can't do.
and the week after that is the 5th of June.
Which I can do.
So I would suggest that we go for,
This is 5th of
unless there's
June.
another day next week that people could make it, a Thursday night next week.
I'm-
No, okay.
I'm open, so.
Oh, no, Thursday night I could,
Thursday you could?
if the plane arrives, yes.
On the
Brendan, can you?
23rd.
I'm a maybe, I think.
You what?
I think Thursday I can do it.
Thursday I
The
could.
big night.
Okay, so.
Okay,
that's-
so-
There we go.
There you
So
go.
let's
There
do,
you go.
let's do next Thursday.
And that is the 23rd?
It is the 23rd of May.
And what exactly would you like me to
So,
bring?
so I think at this point, it seems like the consensus from the board is talking about moving the sign closer to the building.
Kind of north.
Right. Northeast.
Yes.
Yeah.
If you say so.
But I think we
Closer,
have,
closer to the building from the
we have to be
parking lot.
careful because of the tree.
Right, so I think, if you can, go out, get a sense of if that new location somewhat closer is gonna work for you, and speak to administration and make sure that they're gonna give you the sign off on that,
Okay.
then we can, if you think you can get that done by next Thursday, then we can, continue this public hearing to next Thursday. We can reconvene, just 6 PM still work for people? Do you want us to do it earlier so that we can, come in and out?
Yeah, I mean, I could
6
go-
is fine.
6 is fine, okay. So then, if you're agreeable to that, then we'll do that. So I would just suggest that. And I will say this, if you decide you wanted a small parking sign, then I would bring a mock-up of it. If you don't think you need one, and to Bob's point, you feel it's obvious, then that's fine too. I would just say if you're gonna do it, then we're still in the public hearing, you can
Okay.
still present it.
I guess, and I'll put this back to you, I feel in a way, it's never been labeled, and
Yeah.
if we put up a sign that matches our sign, and the concern was that it's too close to the parking lot, that it's not related to the building, and maybe it'll keep people from parking there, then if we label it as parking, people might say, oh, it's for them, it's not for us, so I almost would be inclined not to put
Okay,
the parking sign there, I think like
It
Bob
might
says.
deter people, actually.
Yeah, exactly. That's my only concern, and I completely defer to the board as to whether you think I should come back with a small parking sign.
I'm gonna say no. I don't think it's needed.
I'm ambivalent, I have no feelings either way. But I would say if you could do that, just whatever you need to do to measure, to look,
Yes.
to see if you think you can get it, let's suggest to 10 feet closer and see, just so that you can still kind of see it from both directions. And if that's the case, I would, yes, Mr.
Just
Dunn?
one
Yeah,
last question.
yeah, please.
Do we have an opinion on the pediment? Should we give some instruction or guidance?
If you would like to, yes, before we continue, yes. Please.
I don't have any, I'm fine with the pediment, but I know that was
I
brought
just
up
brought
as
it
an
up,
issue.
I'm not gonna
And I don't know
fight
if there
for
was
that.
other people that felt that way, that they should change that design and show us the design of, how could there's the jester on top?
A nice carved.
That actually would be cute.
It would, that's what I would think of. as
Is the
far as-
jester?
As, instead of, I mean, I see the arts center, I understand the concept, but when I see the jester, it's definitely the theater.
You started it.
Are there any signs in the historic district with pedestals on them like that? I just feel like,
If you go at the peak, right up here, just a little one.
the jester in there? Are we good?
Well, like
We're
the
not in
sign
the
that you
business of
have,
designing your sign.
Thank you.
the sign that's
Has
there
one,
right
yeah.
now
Mhm.
has one. And it does say arts center.
Yeah, no, it's always been the
Also-
arts center.
Has the, you know, the old Howard Junior Theater, what I think of as
Mhm.
the logo.
I don't either,
So
but
it's kind
they
of.
do.
Yeah, we've got the jester's hat kind of inside the logo
Oh, I see.
itself.
Yes, you do.
Yeah.
Oh,
You
yeah.
do.
No,
And you know what? It probably would be much clearer
Yeah.
on the actual sign
Mhm.
than the photo, yeah.
Yes.
And one question, did you have to be set back from the street a certain amount, did they say, or? Because it looks like you're in front of the tree, but when we say go back, I
It's-
wouldn't expect the sign to sit between these trees.
Right. I think it's really gonna be a determination of what the town thinks, and I'll see if I can get Chris to walk over with me or
Yeah.
Lincoln Hooper, and actually spot it on the map, and we can measure it out again. But I think there's only so much grass there, and we don't wanna put it in the asphalt, and we didn't wanna put it too close to the road, because
Understood.
then you're in the plow zone.
Right.
So, you know, it's
Yeah, we
one of
don't want
those.
you to take it out either. Don't want to plow to take it out.
If we take it out, we wanna do it intentionally.
Right, exactly. Okay, if any other comments for them? Then I think we will entertain a motion to continue the public hearing to Thursday, May 23rd at 6 PM. Hopefully we'll be here in the Griffin Room. If not, we will likely be in the small hearing room, but we will include it in our posting, so it will be in Town Hall. Even if we have to be in a foyer someplace, we'll be in Town Hall. So I would entertain that motion.
So moved.
All right. Mrs. Carroll has moved to continue the public hearing to Thursday, May 23rd. I have to look again, sorry, May 23rd. Is there a second?
Second.
Mrs. Steiner is seconded.
That was my second.
Oh, it was Brendan. Sorry.
My voice.
Mr.
Oh, he
Lowney.
had his hand over here.
Mr. Lowney has seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any in opposition? Hearing none, motion carries. It is unanimous.
May I ask a practical question? Do I need
Yes.
to come back with 13 copies, or just, you know, of the whole package, or just one map that it has
It'd be just the
Just
map.
the
at least an
map.
adequate number of
Just the
copies?
map.
for-
Just the map. and
Okay,
you'll be fine.
great, thank you.
Okay,
Yes, thank you very much.
thank you.
Have a great night.
You too. All right. The next item on our agenda is public hearing. It's for HH 2019-1-14. It is a notice of intent that's been received for 198 Main Street, map 56, parcel T5-0, in the R-L zone. The application proposes 100% demolition of detached barn. The application is pursuant to the Code of the Town of Harwich, Chapter 131, Historic Preservation, Article 2. Pavel Brady is the owner applicant. Hello.
Hey, good evening. My name is Pavel Brody. I'm one of the owners at 198 Main Street.
So tell us about your project.
My wife and I, we moved in there about 1.5 years ago. We had a lot of aspirations for the barn. After several people, whether it was construction workers, home improvement people, restoration consultants, whatever you want to call them, building commissioners. We've had quite a few visitors check out the barn, and it's well beyond the scope of what we can do in terms of repairing it or restoring it. We have a daughter right now. She is approaching the age of 2 and is now as wild as ever, walking, running, and as you see through the pictures, there are plenty of holes, missing boards, things are loose. It's just really unsafe, and we're doing it in the best interest of our daughter. We feel like we need to take it down. It is historic, lots of beautiful wood. We have a friend of a friend that said he would like to take it piece by piece down, which would be a long project, but it'd be, I don't know, he'd salvage some of it, and I don't know, we think that would be nice.
And you're not proposing to put anything back up in its place?
Not at this time. We have many other challenges that we're going through.
All right, any comments, questions from the board?
Just
Yeah, Mr.
Question.
Doan, yeah.
Was it the fire department that put the no entrance or?
Yes, so, kind of similar to the other couple that was here earlier, our insurance company will not insure the detached barn, garage, whatever you want to call it, because it was in such disarray. The fire chief came in, put the nice big X on it. We kind of had some lengthy talks as well, because I guess he's likes to restore old buildings, and that's what he did with his place, but, I guess it was kind of for us, we weren't sure which direction, how bad it was, so we were kind of goaded into seeing him and having his opinion in there, so he gave us the X.
Brendan, any comments?
It's a tough one. I think it's everything we talked about even in the last one. Mr. Bradley brought up the point of how do we save these barns, and I drove by it today, and, you know, from the street, it looks amazing. Complements the house nice. It's correct period-wise.
Microphones.
Oh, sorry. Just interested in hearing the rest of the board first on their thoughts as well, but I think it'd be great to save it. So.
Jean?
Well, I also drove by it, and agree with Brendan. The house is lovely, and it's just, if you looked at it and just looked at the shape and didn't know what was on the inside, I mean, it's a lovely barn. The realities of the situation are that it needs a lot of repair work from what I can see from the pictures. I didn't go through.
So, can I just say something? So when we bought it, there was a tree in it, and kind of fell on the backside where you could see the hole. So this time last year, you could actually, when you drove by, you could see a nice front with the tree kind of hanging through it. I took that upon myself to take a chainsaw and kind of buzz it down in a few pieces with some friends and kind of lift it and push it off. So, you know, in terms of driving by it on the street, I think that the visual is kind of the best side, is that front part. Unfortunately, like, our little playground is right behind that. You know, our land kind of goes there, so when we go play with our daughter, that's where we are. So my great-grandparents and grandparents are not the youngest and most mobile, so I can see her making a swift run to the back of the open area and hurting herself. So, you know, in terms of the main house, I think Kevin did a great job keeping that in shape, painting it, doing his renovation stuff. And I think there was a reason why he didn't touch the barn, because of how bad it was. And I think that for my wife and I and our growing family, it's more of a hazard than anything else. So,
Mr. Doan?
Yeah, my impression from the pictures is that it's the back part of the barn that is the worst shape. Is it possible to just demolish the back part and leave the core center structure there? And with the intent of sometime just restoring that?
so, one of the construction improvement people that came over did kind of recommend trying to salvage some of the wood and bringing down just the half and taking away the back
Right.
half or 2/3, whatever the square footage was. After a lot of conversation and going back to Barney Kim about a dozen times, there's just too much rotted wood, and the wood isn't bad where some stuff is already held up by wires. And he's just not sure what would actually hold and what wouldn't if they tried to start moving things around and putting up walls and seeing if the structure would hold. So, again, you know, where you're saying the front is definitely the best part, I don't disagree with you. I think that also goes to show that how good is the best part, if that's kind of where we're at. I mean, when we had some snow, our shingles just come right off the top, so we don't know how bare that is and when that's gonna come in.
Does anybody?
Well, this is just the problem. This is the thing, you know,
Yeah.
we're talking about.
It is. Mr. Doan, yep.
I would, at this point, I would be putting on a demolition delay, but I would like the opportunity to visit the property and see it, so I would like to see if the owner would request a continuance,
Okay.
that we can then view it, just to make sure, to satisfy ourselves.
Absolutely.
Did you get any estimate of, is there a possibility of moving this? Is it tied together at all so that it wouldn't fall apart if it were picked up?
I guess I'm not sure.
I mean, could it go 500 feet down the road?
500 feet?
He's maybe looking at another location.
Where would you like it to go, Bob?
I put it in my bag.
So,
I would take it. I'm gonna get it to my house.
Yeah.
so, okay, so I think the other piece that's missing from this
Sure.
is also typically when we have these demolition delay, so the board's purview is to actually impose a 12-month delay on a demolition permit, which would mean it would have to stay up for a year.
Yep.
And I do recognize the unsafe conditions, typically, we would have some documentation from a structural engineer or another professional that's, you know, kind of giving us some, their professional opinion under their stamp as to what the state of the building is. So I personally am leaning towards a continuance so that we can get some of that information, and also, you know, if you will give some members of the board the opportunity to take a look, and kind of see closer, I will say, you know, knowing the state it's in, it's,
Yeah,
you'll
absolutely.
be able to see more up close. So my thought right now is to do a continuance until our next regular meeting, which is June 19th, right? June 19th is the third Wednesday in June. Would you be able to get some additional information for us?
Absolutely.
And then, if you want to, let the department know, give us a contact information, either phone number or an email to Amy, who's our assistant.
Yep.
Then we can try and coordinate, some times where you could, be there and let people come and take a look if that works for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right? Any other questions from the board? Ladies, did you have any comments that you wanted to speak? If you do, I would just ask you to step to the podium and state your name for the record.
Hello, my name's Jenny Diggs Makihara. I'm the abutter. I live next door. My parents own the building, and I look at that barn out my window. I do support my neighbor's desire to demolish the building, even though it is sad. It is a historic building. Generally, I'm in favor of preserving old buildings, but I've been inside it before he purchased it, and it's really in disrepair. And unless there's someone who can donate a lot of money to save it, I think it's time to let this one go.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Ma'am, anything? All right, then I think we will entertain a motion to continue this to this public hearing till the next regular meeting, which is Wednesday, June 19th at 6 p.m. Does anybody care to make that motion?
So moved.
All right.
And I'll second it.
Mrs. Steiner has made the motion, Mr. Doan has seconded to continue the public hearing. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any in opposition? Hearing none, the motion carries. So we'll see you back here, and if you do get additional documentation, you
Just
can
bring it to Amy.
bring it to Amy in the office, and she'll get it to us.
Same person that gave you the copies.
Exactly.
Okay, you got it.
Exactly.
Thank you so
Thank
much
you
for your
very
time.
much. All right, next item on our agenda. I just wanted to put it out there for you folks to start the ball rolling as to thinking about if there are any projects that we would like to apply for CPA funds for next year. I think, you know, we did on CPC approve funds for Brooks Academy Museum. I'm fairly confident they'll be coming back next year for additional funds, knowing what that report said. But I do think it's a good time to start talking now. Applications are going to be available as of the middle of June, and our deadline for applications for CPC is October 1st typically. So, I mean, now is the time to start discussing if there's anything we'd like to see done.
I had a question.
Yes.
Angelo said at one of our meetings about signage, showing that it is a historic district coming into Harwich Center. You really don't, are there signs? They're very small.
There's a couple of signs, yeah.
Yeah, or
The
also.
brown signs, you see them.
Yeah, but they're not very, I'm in
They're metal.
Harwich.
Are they a
They're
metal?
metal, there's one, coming off Queen Anne, and then there's one
It's just not
in
very.
front of my house,
It's just not
actually.
very
but they're
noticeable.
there.
And also maybe cleaning up the sidewalks and stuff like that. Like,
Is this a sign that says it's a historic district?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
But I think
They're
they're
very
the
Very
street
small.
signs.
Oh, they're
Yeah,
very
big.
They're very small
Yeah, they're-
street signs, right? So, I mean, those are, I guess, the.
I don't know, does that come through there? I'm just throwing it out there.
Yeah,
don't
I
know.
mean, why wouldn't we have a nice, big wooden sign that, I mean, I don't know whether it's covered by historic
I know.
preservation, and
That
that's
would
the
be
other,
my first
that's the other,
impression,
that's
is
the other
that that's
concern.
not
Just throwing it out
historic,
there.
However, there are also, non-historic funds as well, even though it's a historic application.
Yep.
Maybe it's something that can be approved under, not the historic preservation bucket, but under the catch-all.
Okay.
As a highlight. I don't know.
Well, Jean looks
There's
like
also, it's also the cultural district as well, so,
Right.
I get
so
crazy
it's kind of an
about signs.
overlap on the two.
I like what you said about the signage. I mean, I just think it would be nice, especially as we're talking about trying to identify historic districts and identify cultural districts, to have some sort of overarching look and feel, that's all.
I've lived in this town for over 20 years. I had no idea that this was a historic district. I mean, because the sign doesn't really
Yeah.
blare.
Right.
It
up
doesn't,
there.
it doesn't
Yeah,
pop
you
out.
said it.
To me, it doesn't. Maybe I'm just blind.
No, no, right.
I noticed it because it's in front of my house. I see it,
Well,
as soon as I drive by it,
You don't count.
Yeah.
So
Is the sign really in front of your house?
There's one across the street
Yeah.
in front of the
Why is it so
Harwich
close?
house. It's like a brown sign, says historic district. I
I've
believe
seen
it
that,
does.
yes,
Now you get
yeah,
me thinking.
yeah.
No, I think
But
it
you,
is there.
but
See, now
you
you know.
notice it because you're part of it now, right?
Yeah.
And, yeah, it's not something that jumps out at you.
I remember Angelo saying that as he travels off Cape, there's certain towns that he has seen and where they're historic districts, they're very
Oh, absolutely.
notable.
Yeah, people
Right.
put
And,
signs on
yeah,
them.
there's like nice
doors.
planters, they're spruced up a little bit. I mean, Harwichport is more spruced up than Harwich Center. I know they're working on it,
Yeah.
but I was just,
Well, and we
Right.
can always ask for, write to the administration and ask for it to be included, sign money to be included in the budget as well, which isn't also,
they do put
doesn't have
planters
to be
down there, don't they?
CPC funds or whatever, so.
So I have a question about the CPC. It doesn't cover painting, but it covers restoration, is that?
It's
We
not-
go
it
back
doesn't
and
cover-
forth all- It doesn't
Cover general maintenance. Anything that is considered general maintenance is not considered historic preservation.
So.
So
if
there
you-
is a fine line there
Because we
on.
went through that with the library, I remember.
We did.
But, and I would gather we may be going to go through that with Brooks Academy to some extent because they're going to, will they need restoration work done on the paint? I don't know.
My only opinion, and this is just an opinion, is that the east side, which is in such poor shape, does need substantial restoration
Yeah.
because of the boards are sagging. It's not just put on a coat of paint, the whole foundation's coming apart there, and you can see bulges in it, and there's some definite issues there, which that's the first step, is determine what's going on.
Okay, and
That
that's-
one would probably need
yeah, and I
restoration.
think-
And the
and-
rest of the building is actually, painted-wise, the report pointed out, is in very good shape.
But, and that's another thing, I think we want, in a historic district, our buildings to look good.
Oh,
I mean,
absolutely. Yeah.
So here's my
Well, we-
question about the Harwich Theater or the Arts Center, or whatever they call themselves. It really needs something done to it, and, I mean, like, it looked like there was a vine or something growing out of it.
Well, it's a town
And-
building.
And,
Yes.
and so how do they prioritize? I don't know how they prioritize when they're painting
Sometimes
projects,
that's just pointing out to the maintenance department
that it needs
that,
some-
and it's really probably the theater's responsibility as the leaseholder.
As the tenant.
Of
Yeah.
the tenant, saying, hey, there's a vine growing, or this or that, or a shingle's falling off, could you please attend to it? And that's why we have a maintenance department to do that. But sometimes it just needs to be pointed out, because,
I know one of the buildings, I think, had windows at some point, and I'm not sure.
well, that's a whole nother issue,
Okay.
that they theoretically should, because the money that was allotted for windows, and it was combined between West Harwich School
Okay.
and this schoolhouse, was taken back by
Okay.
CPC
Okay.
just a while ago.
Okay.
And so that would have to be reapplied for.
Okay. CS maintenance is near and dear to somebody's heart on this.
Yes.
Um,
I'm saying nothing.
But, I agree, they're town buildings, and, it's certainly one of the reasons I supported the CPC application for Brooks Academy Museum, because it's a historic district. And Bob and Bob, and we've all talked about, demolition by neglect. We're gonna creep up on a point where we're guilty of it, or where the town's guilty of it if some of these things don't get fixed. So, I bring the topic up with full appreciation that there will probably be additional applications for Brooks Academy Museum. I don't know what else this board may want to do. We have,
May I?
please,
Because are we going to lose our previous funding?
I think so.
Because it really was, as you clarified it, it was for a specific cluster type thing.
It
and-
looked like it was for specific clusters from the current existing list. It was supposed to be a deeper dive into the current existing list.
Right.
So that is a question, whether we think it is worthwhile to reapply to get some money to have, even, it may just be, you know, a title examiner to do some short work at the Registry of Deeds on a list of 10 or 20 or 30 properties. It could be something like that. It could be,
I mean, we do have to report back next month in June, don't
we absolutely do, yep, we
And
do.
what are we gonna report back as a committee?
So, you know, I have looked at the list, I've gone through a few, you know, I'm familiar with the Registry of Deeds and pulling up some records. Do I think we could spend some time and do it? But there are probably a good number there that, you know, we're probably talking at least 30 plus, where I think we're on that edge of like a 5-year period or a 10-year period where you're gonna wanna look at deed records.
Right.
So-
But I mean, but the problem is the current grant, does it really say that's what it's for?
It doesn't.
That's what I'm worried about.
It doesn't. So I suspect that, that the money will be rescinded. You know,
So, but-
we're over our timeframe on it,
Right.
where,
So could we take the existing list and do a little bit of digging ourselves and then come up with a list of the ones that we really just don't know?
so if we want to reapply for new money for next year, then yes, I think that's what we'd have to do. We'd have to look at the list and come up and make a decision. And I think too, again, we also have to look at, the list changes every year, right? So this was done I think the end of it was 2015, because we were looking at a lot of 1915 houses, which were some of the questionable ones. So maybe we also want to apply for an update for, you know, to get a list ready for, you know, a 5-year update
Right.
or a 10-year update.
I'm sorry.
No.
I'm trying to remember the number of properties on the list that we were given. Was it?
The
As
master
many as-
list?
I don't know that I
not the
ever saw a
Macus one,
number.
But the one that,
The one that Miranda
Miranda.
had finalized the 4 volumes
Yeah,
at.
was it like 400?
It is, it's quite a lengthy document.
Maybe it's double that. I remember it being a fair
I would think
number.
it's close to 500
Okay.
at least. I wouldn't think it's much less than
So,
that.
but I wonder if we took it and we put it against the assessor's list for those particular ones, and then, you know, did a
Yep.
sample
Yep.
of how many didn't match.
So I think we can do it if that's if we would like to, if that's a project that this board would like to continue with, then I think we should start doing that now so that we'd know and be able to
We should check like.
draft an application.
Do it, can we do it ourselves, or you want to have someone else
No,
do
I
it?
think we can, I think we discuss it and yeah, get it started so that we can,
Whittle it down to a more,
well, I think
Would it be helpful to to apply for any costs to run this commission?
some administrative costs.
Yeah.
So we have a minor budget for like advertising and stuff like that. And we have the assistance of a staff member.
Well,
She's not
sometimes we
full-time in
lose-
historic.
Sometimes we lose control because we're not able to produce like letters to the selectmen or whatever to counteract whatever is going on in town.
We can do that anytime we want. We just have to, if we voted on it, we can do that,
They will do the work for us.
of course. If we vote to do a letter, absolutely. If we took a vote on something that the selectmen were doing, we could certainly do that, and staff would do that for us. We're a public body. So, and
The staff comes from the building department?
Yep.
Right. And the other thing that was in my head years ago was, there used to be like buckets, and they referred to a bucket, a historic bucket, whatever. And there was a certain amount of money that was automatic.
Correct.
Came in from every.
Under
contribution.
the statute, there's a minimum requirement that of the CPA funds annually, 10% goes into historic preservation as a floor. We can always spend more, we can't dedicate less.
Yeah.
10% to affordable housing, 10% to open space. recreation.
And then the other 60% or whatever it was.
Is general.
Was general.
So it can be used for,
Do we have, do we have a budget for the 10% that's coming up?
we can find the budget for what it is.
I mean,
So
do
we
have
only,
do
we
have
only spend
projects?
it if we have applications,
Yeah.
right? So if there are applications, we spend it. We authorized the $130,000 out of historic preservation, and I don't recall whether that was existing or anticipated revenues.
I think it was in, yeah, I don't know.
I don't
But I
remember.
know we didn't spend our budget, which will
No,
be carried
correct.
forward.
Correct,
So there'll be more money for historic
Oh, it does,
next year.
so it goes forward.
right.
So how much will be there, about 20?
Oh, I don't know.
We can find out. I can find out for the next meeting.
Well, it might be helpful
We'll
in
get a
terms,
balance.
of what we could do for a project.
So it's not only, so we also have the ability to, there's an existing amount of money that's already certified. So we can find out what the balance is. And then from the finance director, she will tell us what we could anticipate in revenues for the next fiscal year. And we can authorize those monies as well. So she'll give us a number that's available for us.
Who's the,
That doesn't limit us to spend more or to recommend.
no,
more.
I understand that, yeah. Who is the, I know I'm not saying this properly or anything, but who was the big winner last year on monies?
I don't, really, to be honest, the town, I think the taxpayers were, because we funded, Bob, please, if you wanna speak up, we
No, I mean,
funded,
the majority goes to paying the debt
right.
and the housing.
So we
That
had,
quite a bit.
right, so we had the debt service, we had another 310,000 to the Affordable Housing Trust for affordable housing, 130,000 to Brooks Academy Museum,
Yep.
again, which is, a historic gem and a town building. We funded 3 rec projects. We funded a new scoreboard at White House Field, new lifeguard stands for all of the beaches, and the bathroom for Sand Pond. And then in addition, another kind of open space recreation issue was funding for a revetment at Red River Beach to kind of fix the erosion that's going on.
Is that under recreation?
I believe it was under
It was
general.
split.
General?
No,
Yeah.
wasn't it split?
It may have been.
50% came from open spaces and then the rest.
It
from
may have
general,
been, I don't
something like
remember.
that, yeah.
But we had more money than what we authorized.
Right.
So,
That's nice.
right,
Unusual, but yeah.
right. And as opposed to the year before, which, again, the year before, it was about $3.5 million worth of CPC funds expended. This year, it was closer to, I'd say, 900,000.
Who's paying for the benefit, the Albro House improvements? Where's that coming from?
So there was, in the last round, last year of CPC funds, we had authorized $2,500 for a structural engineering review that was to determine kind of what that, kind of a feasibility study, what the state of the building was and what it could be used for. On our last report, that money had not yet been expended.
Right.
So,
Was there some previous money too for that, for the handicap ramp from a previous year?
I don't know what, I don't know. I'll be honest, I don't know.
Okay.
There may have been,
Money for that? Wasn't that money donated? No?
No,
Gail?
not for the ramp.
Just before we get
The
off the
painting.
Albro House,
yeah,
a couple of years ago, maybe more, didn't we vote at town meeting to create a revolving fund
And that is
for
there.
the Albro House? And it's my understanding that there is space that's being leased.
That is correct.
Is that money going into the revolving
That is
fund?
correct.
So does anyone know what that revolving fund is at this point, and
I
is
did have that information today,
Did you?
and I don't have it
But-
with me.
so,
that would
Actually,
be
I do
used-
have it I have it in the car. Would you like me to get it?
so,
I was just questioning if that's happening, that
Yeah.
whatever that amount is can be used for, instead of preservation, because we'd go to this wherever, but for maintenance, like for painting or for,
So I think that's a good question for our finance director to find out. We can get a balance from her and find out what's in it, who has custody and control and spending authority on it, and kind of what it was authorized for.
and who would control.
Right.
Yeah,
I don't,
I
exactly.
believe it's
I don't
selectman
remember.
or slash town manager.
I would think so.
It was assigned to, well, I know
Town
the,
administrator, yeah.
the town administrator was, it is his responsibility to get the survey done.
Okay. So I will,
Just to, and to
Yeah.
follow, the house didn't get transferred, did it?
it did not.
So it's still
It
where
was,
okay.
it was withdrawn
Right.
from the
And
article.
it's pretty well booked out. It's, I know they have, I think at least about $1,000 income per month
Yeah,
for
that's what I
rentals.
was thinking, that
something
it's
like that.
probably in good shape
Yeah.
to.
So let's, for our next regular meeting, we'll add the, just an update on the revolving fund, and we can ask for that information. I'm gonna go there because I'm crazy. I loved that map, that,
The walking
so,
map.
2 years ago, 3 years ago, Jean had gone to an event in Falmouth, or an event
Somewhere, yeah, it was-
somewhere,
It was
and
one of the historic, the state historic preservation things.
Falmouth, I think, had done a map that showed overlays of, in sepia tone, of the historic buildings that were no longer there as part of what, so that you
It was
could do a walking tour?
They did walking tours for I think there were 5 villages of Falmouth, something like that. So they did a walking tour for each one, and that's what they did. They, two
So,
different shades.
at one
so you-
point, the map was great. I don't know
Yeah.
if we still have the map
I
somewhere.
have it, yes, I have it with my files, but I tried again to find out some information. That woman just does not return calls.
Gotcha. So I'm just gonna, there were many ideas. I know there has been much squawking about West Harwich and whether there should be a second historic district in West Harwich at Captain's Row. I don't know if that's something that, I know the years ago, they had applied for money for a national historic register. I don't know that it's necessarily for, I don't know that it's CPC funds for, you know, just a district either. But just as far as things that we want to start talking about and thinking about, I would be remiss if I didn't say I've been to multiple planning board meetings in the last 2 months, and there has been much discussion about the historic district. And again, last evening was his planning board, and we were again at discussing 52 Route 28. And, you know, I'm repeating myself over and over again by saying that we took the action that we were able to take by imposing the demo delay, and that was really where the extent of what we could do. I just wanted the agenda item for people to start thinking about if there's some type of a historic project or another project that you would like to see us do. If we were looking for CPC money for something, I would suggest we start thinking about it. The one thing I would suggest before I forget, we don't have, from what I can see, I don't think we have a historic preservation plan here in Harwich. I don't know that this board has ever done a historic preservation plan. And perhaps that is something, you know, the town is seeking, it's time to start updating the local comprehensive plan. A historic preservation plan is certainly a component part of that, along with, you know, an open space and recreation plan, which we've already done in the last couple of years, a housing production plan, which we've done in the last couple of years. So I think the missing piece of those component parts right now is the historic preservation plan. So perhaps it's an application to seek a consultant to help us draft that. And then, because again, that is something that we can put together and start to think about all of these things, what we want the historic district to look like, what, you know, and what goes along with it. I am certainly not the person to draft that. We need help to do something like that, so,
Sarah Korcheff might be a help
absolutely.
in directing us to some
Absolutely.
people, like the guy a fellow in Provincetown, he came and talked to our
Yeah, he was
commission.
very
He's
impressive.
fabulous, and they've done some really nice things
So that would
there.
be another, you know, another potential,
I think that should be top of the list.
I do too.
I really
Okay.
do. I know the question came up on town meeting floor as far as whether that plan is going to include the piece of, you know, the historic preservation. And, you know, the answer was kind of sketchy, yeah, it would, but it wasn't an in-depth, and it wasn't
so comprehensive
what we're
plan is
really
just,
looking for.
a comprehensive plan is just that, it's everything.
Right, there's a little piece of it
It's
over there, and yeah,
everything.
it'll be addressed.
And if
but-
we want our opinion as a commission a part of that, I mean, those are the plans that they use to kind of draft the main plan. So, I don't know what we're looking at for money-wise in that. We certainly, I think Sarah Korjeff is a great idea to reach out to her, to get some names, to start getting ideas on what something like that would entail.
Right.
You know,
It
I
seems
don't
to
know
me
whether that's a 40-page
Listen.
document or a 10-page document. I personally don't know.
I was on the housing production plan, that thing was
Huge.
Huge.
Yeah.
And
Yes,
so would the
absolutely.
preservation plan be.
Yeah.
And if that's in place, then all the little bits and pieces we've been talking about would kind of fall
Right.
in. So now you're talking historic district signs, and you're
Right.
talking, you know,
Right,
presents,
exactly.
and the
Right.
things that, it just seems to me that it makes sense that that would come first, and then everything else would roll into it. And we'd have a plan to do that, you know.
And I think we should incorporate what Bob was saying about the homes that are being neglected.
Yes,
on
Oh,
here.
yeah, that
yes,
should be all
yeah.
part
You know,
of it.
Right.
and like Bob said, you know, if somebody buys a house, it's not their fault that the
No.
previous owners
Right.
let it go for 30 years, but we're now putting, you know, a
Right.
demolition delay on these people, and it's like, you know, I just,
Yeah,
in
but
some
it's-
cases.
when they buy something, they're looking at something.
Yeah, true.
And they know the condition of that building when they're buying it. And if it were clear in the guidelines,
Yep,
Right.
exactly.
it's so crucial to get those guidelines right, because if it was
Some
clear,
people probably don't
all you
know.
have to do is tell at the point of sale, this is what you're dealing with.
And
But
at one
wouldn't
point,
those
remember.
things come into, if you have a preservation plan, wouldn't that incorporate the other players in that, not just?
It should,
the historic
of course,
plan?
it should.
It would incorporate the real estate issues and, you know.
It should.
I think every real estate office that deals in Howard should have a copy of it from us, so.
Right.
Some sort of,
That would be part of your
Yeah, but
preservation.
Rehab
deter some people
guidelines.
though,
Hmm?
too. That might deter some people from
So
buying.
what's the,
something.
what's
Well,
the
so
state of our
what?
guidelines?
Yeah.
so what? I mean, you got so many people buying in now anyway.
Exactly.
Well, we tried, remember a few years ago, to get the real estate community involved, and
yeah.
we even had somebody on the board or on the commission for a while. It
Yeah.
just didn't go anywhere, but I think, I love the idea of an overall plan, because I
Right.
really think that's a proactive way to get things
Well, it gives you
moving
something
in
to
the right
look at,
direction.
plan.
Yeah, and
You-
it gives
you-
us guidance of
you
where
know,
we
it's
should,
pretty-
what
it's-
we should spend our effort on.
Right.
It's pretty well proven that districts that are well controlled, I don't want to use the word control, but well defined and have some sort of purpose, design purpose in their entirety, they do very well in the market. I mean, look, and all you have to do is look at Newburyport or Beacon Hill or Portsmouth, Portsmouth, New Hampshire, or any of those towns. They've done extraordinarily well, and you come down to the Cape here, and they're not doing that well. It's not holding up as well as those other towns. There are some towns that don't even let trucks in, you know, I mean, it's.
So, and again, we have this whole, the Historic Center initiative is still, I think it's on a hiatus right
It's
at the
on
moment,
hold.
but it
Well,
hasn't.
there's something wrong with that bothered me. It really got my goat when that Doan fellow.
The other dome.
But he involved all the business people. He didn't, yeah, it was so pointedly an idea to expand, to grow, and this kind of thing. It was in the,
There was
No,
a
I
second
don't know.
meeting where, I think there was like 65 people that showed up.
There were a lot of people in this room, yeah.
This room was packed. And it was a different vibe than the first time around.
a different vibe?
Yeah, and it was a lot to do with safety, sidewalks,
That's what it
signage.
should be, yes.
Yeah.
It was those three things, you know. Yeah, people want to create parking, there was a lot of, you know,
Yeah, the
other
whole
stuff
parking
going
thing
on.
kind of threw me. I'm like,
Yeah,
we did it.
you have to grow it to
Yeah.
maybe support
The
the
what?
parking, but
They were
but it
gonna
was
put- they wanted-
mostly-
They was talking about a big parking lot behind
yeah,
the,
but mostly
All the buildings across the
well,
street.
yeah,
everyone wanted
Along Parallel
access to
Street.
the center, walking, sidewalks, and, you
lighting
know.
probably, right?
yeah.
So, my only point with that committee is that it hasn't been disbanded yet.
No.
It's still around, it may still be a resource with, you know, for those kinds of issues, you know, the public hearings and things like
Well,
that.
I was in the founding of the original
Mm.
thing what is it, 1988.
It's a good year.
And it started out frankly with just 3 or 4 of us. And then it suddenly caught on and went very fast for
Yeah.
a while. And then it petered out. And I'm a little afraid that this will do the same thing, you know, that there'll be some infighting or whatever's gonna happen, and then it sort of goes away. I think this commission, in some ways, is a crucial part of this whole thing. I think, in fact, you could take over the leadership of the whole thing.
Nice try. Nice try. Not gonna happen.
You might
Not
even
gonna
be able to
happen.
get a salary for it.
Yeah, not gonna happen.
The Historic Commission Initiative.
Yeah, great.
Presented
No,
by
thank you.
Mary.
No, thank you. Thank you, but no.
You do it.
No sale.
You live right in Harwich Center.
So perhaps we start with this. Bob, if you want to, I think a good start would be to talk to Charlene and, as our town planner, and
Right now,
to Sarah Korjeff,
yeah.
to kind of get some names so that we can start kind of reaching out and get a sense as to what a historic preservation
What's the process to get it just,
plan would do, and perhaps thoughts on CPC funding for that as well. I'm there right with you.
Charlene is on the housing production plan.
Right. So, would you,
Yeah, I'll talk
would
to
you be able to do that?
Check. Yeah, see if we get.
Great, and then we can kind of jump on it, because I do, you know, this year, there weren't too many applications. I'd like to get in. Hopefully, there aren't too many applications next year, but let's jump on something
Right.
and make some good use of some of that historic preservation
Right.
money.
Okay. And now, if we're still talking about this,
Mhm.
what should I report back to CPC in 3 weeks?
Yeah.
4 weeks? That, yes, we're not gonna use the money?
To be honest with you, I'm kind of fine with that, because it's
Right.
gone on so long, and I
Right.
just don't think I personally, I'll defer to everyone else. I don't know that the fit is there with the application, haven't seen the application.
Right,
It's definitely to do a deeper dive into clusters.
right.
Maybe we still want to do that at some point,
But we have to, yeah,
but
we have to define it better and
I think
be
so.
incentive, you know.
I think so.
Let it go.
But I don't think anybody's really been interested in pursuing that.
I don't think so
we
either.
focus on, like you're saying, the preservation plan.
Oh, I think that's.
like that,
better,
too.
yeah.
Let's just start with that. And we can pick away at the property list or whatever in our own time if people want to do that. I mean, that's,
Or we can reapply to,
Yeah, true.
to update the
There's
property
no reason we
list.
can't put in 2 applications.
Oh, no, yeah, absolutely.
So, you know, the money's there, the command from CPC is that we now, they've imposed this on everybody, we now have to start reporting every 6 months as to what's been done with the money, what's gonna be done with the money, and the expectation is that within 3 years, it is ready to be pulled back.
I can see
So,
that.
and it makes sense, because it's taxpayer dollars, it should be available for another project if somebody's not using it. So, I don't know that they'd give us much choice
No.
in 2 weeks, to be honest. But are there any other thoughts besides, jumping on the historic preservation plan? I do like, and I do think,
How much do we have, how much is in there now for the deeper dive into the?
so the money that's left
that we
over,
haven't spent?
it was about $25,000.
That should be more than enough to hire a consultant.
Oh, no, but you can't use it for that.
I
You
know,
can't-
but I'm
right.
just saying, yeah, it's too bad that
No,
they
it'll-
didn't switch it.
But it goes back into the
Historic
historic
Yeah.
bucket,
Yeah,
So,
which means there'll be $25,000 more,
Right.
in the
so
bucket.
that's great, so
Right.
then, so that's fine.
Hopefully
'cause
we'll
we're
get it,
not
we'll get
ready
it
to-
back and more.
Right, right.
With the application.
So, any other thoughts from people on CPC or other things that we think we need to work on?
I
I
do
have
have to,
one question.
Yep.
On this West Harwich thing.
Yep.
It was very hot for a while. They got all worked up over it, and they had done, I thought, some really good work on setting up a foundation for a
We have a
project.
website, yeah.
Hmm?
There's a
Yeah.
website as well, yeah.
Yeah, well, now what's happened is, one of the buildings they were trying to save is gone. Bob and I went down and took a look at what was the name of I forget, I can't remember the name.
yeah,
Bishop's Terrace.
Bishop's
yeah,
Terrace.
Bishop's Terrace.
It's such a shame.
And that was shocking to me, because
It's awful.
I couldn't believe it.
I mean,
It's sad.
I remember it as
Yeah.
not, I wasn't that young
No, my
at the
rehearsal
time.
dinner
and
was there.
Was it? Yeah, I mean, we're talking,
What was?
In
I mean,
19, my
20 years?
rehearsal dinner was there in 1990.
Wow.
yeah, so, yeah, I was in college. So,
Well, it's gone, I think.
Well,
do you-
It's pretty close to it. It's on the edge.
it's
The
very
the
on
main building is probably salvageable, but some of the wings
yeah.
have fallen down and back.
Yeah, there.
it's, I think I think the other one is, I think the parsonage it's almost too late.
That's
I was-
gone, too.
I was hopeful that Bishop's Terrace isn't yet. I mean, was such a beautiful building.
I mean, the worst parts are ones you could easily tear off, and they're not old.
Right,
They've been
Gotcha.
additions, so.
gotcha.
Well,
The original
there's-
core building, but there's no roof. I mean, the roof that's the
Gone.
problem. If you can just redo the roof, that's gonna go a lot to save that building.
Mm-hmm.
How long has that essentially been closed?
I don't know.
Not that long, like
I
to,
mean,
I think it was
Eight.
open when we moved
Probably at
here.
least
7
15
years.
Oh, really?
What?
yeah,
Oh,
but to,
No, no,
Oh, I
no.
didn't
It was
know
like,
it
it was
was
literally,
moved here.
yeah, it was, when I was
About
on the
10
cultural
years.
council, they had a special dinner there. And that was 6 years, 8 years ago, I think.
oh, God, no way.
No way, it had to have been at least 10 years ago, I'm
Really?
thinking. Yeah.
Sometimes.
Because she's saying 1990, so I can see that.
And it wasn't like,
That's 29 years
it's
ago.
20 years ago, and then, I'm thinking it, even back then, you could tell it was an old building. I mean, it wasn't like,
Oh, yeah.
but,
But it was considered sort of very nice, but sort of funky at the
oh,
same
it was
time.
beautiful.
Yeah.
I mean, it was
It had,
beautiful.
it
I
had a
mean,
good feel. It had a good feel to it in a
beautiful.
way.
it was.
Unless you get stuck with some mold in the corner or something.
My favorite thing in that whole stretch was the Captain's Cargo
Oh, yeah.
store that used to have the sign that said last
Last
stop before the bridge.
Yeah.
I used to think that was cute.
About that.
Yeah, I used to think that was cute. But yes,
As far as CPC, should I
Yep.
report on the CPC meeting?
sure, please.
We have a.
Yes, absolutely.
So one of the issues that came up was that it's very clear in the state mandate that the CPC has to, or anybody wanting historic money has to get approved by the Historic Commission in the town. Now, we're the closest thing to the Historic Commission, but I don't think in our charter there's anything referencing that we approve of projects that aren't in our immediate purview like this. And I don't know if we have to adjust something or, the original bylaws or
Yeah.
how, when the committee was formed. But I think it's something we have to review to ensure that we are
Agreed.
the authority
Right.
to do that,
I think we're the only one that exists in town to
right now.
be the one to do it.
Right.
But to your point, yes, we probably should look at the look at the documentation around the historic district and historic commission, and I want to say it was probably redone 10 years ago.
When we went to the year and a half, was
Yeah.
that the last time we did anything with it?
Probably.
Or
Let
to the
me-
year, we went from 6 months to a year.
Let me, so what I will do is pull up the bylaw and the charter provisions that deal with us.
Yeah.
And, put them on next meeting. So we can look at that. So put that on June meeting as well.
And may I bring up one other point?
Please.
On the, which, when I asked the question about the symbol on the building, I've been driving around town, and that no, don't enter is on a lot of houses.
It's on a lot of houses.
And I would like to request from either fire department or building, I think it's the fire department's doing them.
It is.
I think we are entitled to a list of all those buildings that have been done that, because I found one off of, right near the barn on Queen Anne Road. That's a house that's set back, and it has one on it. I'm looking at why, because the roof was intact, but the windows are just broken out. So I don't know whether it's really degraded or what, and the other thing, is this a mechanism that people have figured out that they can go, like this application almost sounded like they went to the fire department, says, gee, would you condemn this?
Yeah, it sounds
I
like
don't
he was told to,
Right,
you know,
right.
so, and I was.
And that was probably
I don't
from
think
his
he was looking
insurance
for it,
agent.
But I
Yeah,
think
it
it was just
could
part of
be.
the insurance
Right,
Yeah.
right.
discussions.
But I think we should be, maybe if we can do some proactive
And to
things,
the
I don't know
officially
if we-
document it, is it, or is it just something that is done?
Well, it should be officially
Oh, I
documented.
think they have a list.
I would
They
think so.
have-
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
So we can reach out to the chief,
The one,
reach out to the chief or the deputy chief.
the building in question on 28, the one that the fire department had put the big X on.
Bishops or the
Not the Bishops.
parsonage?
Is it the parsonage that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I'm thinking of the one that they wanted to tear down and put in
Oh, 52.
the
or
dollar
whatever.
store or
That's-
something.
That's the one,
That's
that's the one,
That's the parsonage.
that's
Is
the
that
one,
the parsonage?
Yes.
Yeah, next
Oh,
to
it
the
is
church.
okay.
Because
that's the one that we
I
imposed
thought
the
that was
12-year,
one-
the 12-month delay, the 12-year
Oh,
delay,
yes,
when
it
people
was.
like that.
But
People were like that.
Wouldn't be here.
I thought that was I must have my houses mixed up. A friend of mine, Bill Perkins, grew up in one of those houses down there, and I thought that was the one.
You know Bill Perkins?
I do.
Because he had the store across the street, right?
Yeah.
It's one of the sons, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, oh, wow.
yeah, but I thought that was the house because he was so upset that the X was on. He went in the back way
Yeah,
and said he didn't think it was that bad inside.
I don't think it is,
Yeah.
no.
It's an Italianate house, and it meaning it's only about 120 or 30 years old. 1880, something like that, 70, 80. It's so obvious, that house is so obviously belligerently opened up. I mean, you can see that somebody went in and broke a window, whatever, pulled out a wall or whatever the hell is in there.
Isn't it possible for the Board of Health to contact the owners or whoever and tell them it has to be boarded up for safety reasons?
So the building inspector would
Or
typically do
whoever.
that. Mhm.
Well, you got the point, you said the right thing. The point is that there should be some way that they're dictated to, that they have to enclose
Right.
the house
I mean,
and
public safety.
protect it from weather.
Mm-hmm.
And there should be a fine if they don't.
So I think those,
For
I do
public
think,
health,
I do think all those things probably exist in our
I think they're in
in
there.
our bylaws.
Are they enforced?
And it's just a matter of enforcement and knowing about it and getting to it and,
Well, I think step one
But I-
is to find
and I
out
will
what
say, I
buildings
mean-
have the big X on it.
right.
Those are the
Start
buildings,
with
then we
hotel.
contact to see if there's any.
Yeah, I can tell you in the
intent
city
made.
that happens every day.
Yeah.
And you see people putting a plywood.
Well, sometimes you have a
closing
code,
the house in.
other, larger cities often have a code enforcement officer. I know my hometown did. And that's what she did. She drove around all day. And that was her job,
Close the-
exactly. And to write fines. I will say I don't want this to appear that we're complaining about the building department either, because when I did call about Forest Street, they went right out and did what they could to stop the destruction, unfortunately. Wasn't early enough, but So they have been very responsive, and I think some of it is, if you see it, say it, you know? But yes, I do think it's smart. We'll request a list from the chief of buildings that are in
That'd be the
disrepair.
kind of thing that could go into a little pamphlet or something.
Well, it
you know.
seems as though if there is something on the books, and there would be fines that could be imposed, and we're always in that situation where the town is looking for more revenue. I mean, I'm not saying use it as a moneymaker, but if it's there and it's not being enforced, that's money on the ground. And plus, buildings.
You know, this thing happening here with the parsonage, the house is set right at the corner, which left a huge acreage on the side and in back, which could be dealt with in various development, in some form or fashion that would be pretty good. But what's happening is they're gonna make it sounds to me like they're gonna plunk a concrete box.
Yeah.
And,
They plan
So what the planning board did vote last night is we voted to continue the public hearing so that we, as the members of the planning board, could get more information and just make a determination as to whether we wanted to refer it for limited review by the Cape Cod Commission. It was requested by many people in the audience. It was very heavily attended and heavily commented at the public hearing. So we agreed to hold a special meeting to discuss that issue so that we can discuss whether we want to refer it for limited review and determine whether we want to refer it for historic, for architecture, for traffic, or what reasons. So, so that's still ongoing. So, yeah, it's
Well, at
not,
least
it's not over with yet at that point.
Right, but wasn't there, you're gonna put two houses in back, is that off the plans?
No, there was no two houses in back.
I think they changed, because it was supposed to be.
Yeah, never saw that.
Yeah.
I never saw that in the plan.
There's
Just
also a
the-
lot of land in back of the, I forgot the name again, the restaurant.
Bob Bradley's house, there's a lot of land.
You don't talk about Bob
Bishop's
Bradley's
Terrace.
house.
Bishop's Terrace.
Bishop's Terrace.
Oh, yeah.
Bishop's Terrace, there's a lot of land
That's a
back there.
big
Plus a
lot.
couple of little houses that are part of the whole complex, that
Yeah.
are falling down and just.
Yeah. It's a shame.
You- you-
Bef-
That was a shocking little trip to go in back there. I was shocked by that.
We have a couple of other quick items. Minutes. Has everybody had a chance to review the minutes?
Yep.
No.
Then I would entertain a motion on the minutes.
I entertain a motion to approve the
This here?
minutes.
Motion to approve. Mrs. Eldridge, do we have a second?
Second.
Mr. Doan
That's the,
has seconded. All
Oh,
those
I'm
in
sorry.
favor?
That's
Aye.
Aye.
Any in opposition?
Dame-
I think I have to abstain, don't
You don't, you can vote, or you can
No,
abstain if you
you're
want.
not there, you can vote.
I? Aye.
Okay, so unanimous then, and there is a zoning board of appeals in the packet. Is there anything in there that the board wishes to comment on? Anything look like it's of substance? If no, then we can move on. I have one item that I am gonna say was unanticipated by the chair within 24 hours, within 48 hours of the meeting. We got a communication from a group that is looking to submit a letter about making the Nantucket Sound a resource, kind of preserve it. So let's see. I'm going to read this. This is something from the Cape Cod Times. It's an opinion letter. Talks about back in 2005, a wind power company known as Cape Wind received permission from the Massachusetts Energy Facility Siting Board to proceed with a plan to build dozens of wind turbines in the heart of Nantucket Sound. It was the first of a series of legal hurdles that owners of Cape Wind would have to jump over to transform their plan into reality. This is an opinion letter that appeared in the Cape Cod Times. But the legal hurdles would prove to be only one of Cape Wind's worries during its quixotic quest to set up windmills in the Sound. From the start, the effort sparked a passionate debate about a range of topics, from what it meant to be a true environmentalist to the intrinsic value of the unhampered view to who can actually own the waters that we all enjoy. Now, nearly 15 years later, a coalition of environmental groups, indigenous people, lawmakers, fishermen, and private business, many of which successfully opposed Cape Wind's efforts, have again banded together to provide a definitive answer to this final question, that the waters of Nantucket Sound belong to no one and everyone, and that they should therefore be protected through a National Historic Landmark designation that would cover, quote, "the water body located between the mean low water line that lies between the southern shore of Cape Cod, between Monomoy and Mashpee, and the islands of Martha's Vineyard and Nantucket." According to a letter penned by the Region 6 state representatives last year, that was when the move toward a landmark designation truly began in earnest, a movement that has continued unabated since then. Their collective and bipartisan letter to the state's two Democratic senators, Edward Markey and Elizabeth Warren, as well as Democratic Congressman Bill Keating, urged them to enact legislation that would lead to such an action, citing his, quote, "historic, environmental, and economic arguments in support of their request." The lawmakers spell out the specific goal quite clearly: to prevent the development of any type of industrial activity, including oil drilling, mining, and offshore wind farms. They do, however, allow for the installation of underwater cables that would link the mainland to any future wind farm, albeit one located outside of Nantucket Sound. In fact, the move has garnered wide and bipartisan support, including from Republican Governor Charlie Baker, who in his letter to Markey, Warren, and Keating points out that the National Park Service declared in 2010 that Nantucket Sound was eligible for listing on the National Register of Historic Places. But perhaps the most impressive letter to the senators and the congressmen came from the broad coalition of local interests who are also pushing this initiative. The Alliance to Protect Nantucket Sound, which took on a prominent role in the effort to stop Cape Wind, has again lent its voice to the fight, arguing that the National Historic Landmark designation would essentially be the capstone in its fight to preserve this body of water. But the coalition also includes dozens, if not hundreds, of ordinary fishermen, birders, Chamber of Commerce members, town officials, and even wind power advocates, all of whom recognize that the value of Nantucket Sound lies in its pristine nature, and that the best way to ensure that it remains so in perpetuity is through designation on the federal level. We wish the proponents of this endeavor a strong wind at their backs, clear skies, and smooth sailing, and hope that it will not be too long before the President is signing legislation that officially recognizes what most of us have known for our entire lives, that Nantucket Sound is a natural and national treasure. Now, there are, we received the email, that is was an opinion in the Cape Cod Times. There was a letter dated May 13th, 2019. It says, "Dear Senator Markey, Senator Warren, and Congressman Keating, we, the undersigned, write to you to urge you to introduce and support federal legislation to secure permanent protection for Nantucket Sound. Nantucket Sound and its historic environmental, wildlife, and cultural resources are of great importance to the regional economy, supporting commercial and recreational fishing, tourism, marine transportation, aviation, marine trades, and other businesses and industries that are vital to the Cape and Islands. Permanent protection would preserve Nantucket Sound's rich cultural and tribal heritage, the historic features of its maritime history, including the role of our fishing industry. It would maintain the Sound's unique environment with respect to fish, marine mammals, and birds. The area is recognized habitat for many state and federally protected species, including roseate terns, piping plovers, sea turtles, right whales, and gray seals. Protection would also promote tourism and benefit the regional economy of the Cape and Islands. Historic preservation advocates, environmentalists, commercial fishermen, tribes, businesses, chambers of commerce, municipalities, environmentalists, elected officials, and others, we fully embrace this important preservation goal. Nantucket Sound, Cape Cod, and the islands of Martha's Vineyard and Nantucket form an integral part of the maritime history of this country. The adjacent land areas are home to numerous historic properties, including the National Historic Landmarks of Nantucket Island and the Kennedy Compound in Hyannisport. This unique ecosystem is home to many different species of wildlife, including federally protected birds and several types of seals, porpoises, turtles, and whales. The Sound supports a fishing industry that is of historic significance and continuing economic importance, and it attracts millions of visitors each year to drive our local tourist economy. Nantucket Sound also has sacred value to the Native American people of the region, and as such has been designated a traditional cultural property eligible for listing on the National Register of Historic Places. We fully support protection for the historic, environmental, cultural, and tribal resources of Nantucket Sound, while allowing for continued commercial and recreational fishing activities and other ecologically and economically sustainable uses of the marine environment, including the siting of electrical transmission infrastructure from responsibly sited clean energy projects. We urge you to designate the Sound as a National Historic Landmark to recognize this unique cultural, tribal, environmental, and maritime history. We also urge you to prohibit the issuance of any leases, permits authorizing energy generation projects in the Sound while ensuring that no regulatory or management authority of commercial or recreational fishing activities is added through this legislation. Furthermore, we urge that this legislation not in any way prohibit or otherwise impact the installation of transmission infrastructure that is used exclusively to connect the mainland grid offshore wind generation facilities whose turbine arrays are located more than 10 miles from an inhabited area or that are located in upland locations. Such a bill would be precedent-setting legislation that achieves protection of the many public interest values of an entire marine ecosystem and does so without imposing additional cost or management responsibilities on government or new regulatory requirements on businesses or the public. We appreciate your prompt attention to the enactment of federal legislation to preserve this national treasure in perpetuity. Thank you. And it is signed by Audra Parker, President and Chief Executive Officer of the Alliance to Protect Nantucket Sound. There are a number of groups on this. American Bird Conservancy, Barnstable Clean Water Coalition, the Cape Cod Chamber of Commerce, let's see, the Dennis Historical Society, let's see, the Harwich Chamber of Commerce, the Harwich Conservation Trust, looking for our other Harwich members here. Massachusetts Commercial Fishermen, the Massachusetts Lobstermen, the Nantucket Historical Association, the Nantucket Historic District Commission, the Mark Elzer is the town manager in the town of Barnstable, the Board of Selectmen for the town of Dennis, the Board of Selectmen for Edgartown, the Board of Selectmen for the town of Harwich, Board of Selectmen for Mashpee, Nantucket, Oak Bluffs, Tisbury, Yarmouth Town Administrator, and others. I would say the request came in to see if we would be willing to add our names to the list in support of the letter, and it came in late on Monday. I didn't see it until Tuesday. So there was not time to agenda the item. I would offer it up to you folks so that you can decide whether it's something that, as the Historic District and Historical Commission, this board would like to add its name to. So, your thoughts. And if nobody's interested, we can table it. And if people are interested, then we can add our names, so.
Personally, I wouldn't vote for it. That's just me.
My issue would be it brings up a lot of questions. And for instance, wild as it may be, historically Harwich had wharfs off the water. Would that prevent us from ever building a wharf for whatever reason? Could a town that had an opportunity to build a harbor to access thing, would that prevent
Understood.
that? So,
Understood.
I mean,
Good
it's
point.
just my
Might
question.
cause more-
Conceptually, I like it, but there's too much unknown right now for
It
me
came
to
in,
vote.
and I wanted to raise it so that we had the opportunity to, you had the opportunity to hear it. I'm sorry, I thought we had added, I thought we had multiple copies for everyone, so you could have read it, read along, but I'm happy to keep it in the file, and we can revisit at a later date if we would want to, but this, like I said, just came in late Monday for Tuesday morning, so it's a communication, I didn't want to ignore it. Nobody else has anything else to say? Bob, I think you did the CPC update, was there anything else?
We voted on the minutes?
And I really don't think there's anything else on planning. Planning was just the meeting from last night.
Right.
So I think that's where we stand with that, but does anybody else have anything?
I mean, on the Affordable Housing Trust, just so everyone's aware that the property that we were going over tonight with the sign on Sisson 265 was transferred to the Affordable Housing Trust. So, but.
And it was transferred for a feasibility, so you're gonna do a feasibility study first?
Correct. So we have no idea of the plan for that property, but we'll start the process once they're officially transferred, I believe, next week, so.
But it had already been approved by town to use it for affordable housing.
That's correct. It was one of those
That
properties
joint.
that, right, it was already slotted for that. It just was given before the trust was formed, so it had to be kind of,
Formally
I guess,
given over.
formally given, correct.
Okay.
Just a point of
Yes.
information from the planning meeting.
Yep.
There were comments being made on a Facebook page or whatever, so I was kind of reading through it. And I found it interesting that a lot of the people commenting are under the impression that West Harwich already is a local historic
We've
district.
had that comment, and we have had to repeat that on
Yeah, I just
multiple
found it
times.
Interesting.
Letters that have come in and statements that have been made is that it's a historic district and that it's, a historic area. And Charlene has tried to state that, it's,
Just
there,
not official.
it's not a historic district like our Howard Center Historic District is. So there is no ability to permit for like and feel. We can't really speak to aesthetics from a regular zoning perspective, and tried to explain the difference between a National Register Historic District versus
I just found it
a
interesting.
local historic district.
Kind of speaks to the work that the people in that area have put out. Unfortunately, not, it's not come to fruition, but a lot of
Right.
the people that they've contacted are kind of under the impression
Yeah,
that it
I can share that link. A customer of mine was telling me about it, and I told him I was on the commission for Harwich, and I really didn't know about it, so they sent me the link recently.
Please.
So I'll forward it to you guys, so you can see it.
That's great. So, yeah, they had applied for CPC funding, and I think were denied, and there were other towns that had been denied for the same reasons.
Yeah, it's a,
Because it was to,
generally speaking.
it was to do the application for a National Historic Register district. So I think that's where they got stalled, because I think they had reviews. But yes, it has been said many times at our planning board meetings that it is a historic district, and it is just simply not. And that's why, again, last evening, I repeated that just for status, that this board took the maximum action that we could take, which was impose the demo delay. And what I said last night is what I said at the time when they were leaving. I said, I hope you take the opportunity to work with the neighbors. And of course, the neighbors were very much up in arms, because that clearly has not happened. So, and I had to, one lady, I think, thought I said we had required it. I said, no, we had no authority to require it. We just, I did make the statement that I hoped that they would work with the neighbors, and clearly that hasn't happened, unfortunately. But like I said, it is now, the commission is gonna, the planning board's gonna meet to kind of discuss whether the Cape Cod Commission is the right next step for it, or whether we'll just continue to go forward. But if there's nothing else,
I move to adjourn.
second, can I second it?
I'll second.
Thanks, Brendan.
You will do.
All right, we are adjourned.